Turning on longboards. We know how it should look, but translating this into practice is easier said than done, due to a variety of factors such as your position on the board and on the wave. Today, I'm going to delve into 3 ways to turn successfully on a longboard. This is tip time, now let's get into it. Okay guys, welcome back to another segment of Tip Time where we take a deep dive into your questions. Great question today from Brian, and it specifically was asking more about where to place the back foot when you're going to turn a longboard. But I thought this would segue really well into a few more aspects of the difficulty in turning longboards. And there's 3 main things that I wanted to cover today, which we'll step through as we go along. So the common things that I see being problems for people when they're longboarding is firstly the position on the wave. So because longboards are so big, we do need a fair bit of space in order to turn effectively. So if we're not giving ourselves the right opportunities with respect to the position on the wave, that can be a big thing to focus on. The second thing is going to be our position on the board. The back foot, should it be right on the tail? Should it be a little bit further towards the side of the rail? So that's what we'll delve into today. So I wanted to start off by addressing Brian's question as to the position of the foot on the tail. Where should you be placing it? Should it be right in the middle over the stringer or on either side of the rail? Now, firstly, I do think that when we're turning a longboard, it's really important to make sure that we do have a little bit of preference to the side of the rail. If we think about a shortboard, what's happening is when we place our foot on the tail, we essentially cover the whole span or the width of the tail with our foot. And so it's really easy just to lean on the toes to engage one side of the rail, lean on the heel to engage the other side of the rail. Now, unfortunately, this isn't the case with longboards because of the width in the tail, and so we need to be a little bit more precise with exactly where it needs to be placed. We can see quite often this is where a lot of people go wrong with their turning on longboards, because they're placing their foot right in the middle of the board at the tail. What this does though is because they can't really preference one side of the rail over the other, because there's not enough pressure going onto the side of the rail because the board or the width of the tail is so big, they essentially just place a lot of weight onto the tail and they slow the board down without placing the board on tilt or placing the board on its rail, which is again what allows our turns to occur. So we get this feeling of this heaviness or this going really slow sort of feeling. In order to fix this, we do need to, as we spoke about before, put our foot on either side of the rail. So we can think about if we're going to be leaning on that heel side rail, we need to make sure that our foot is landing further towards the heel side rail, and vice versa. If we're going to be placing more weight onto the toe side rail, that's where we need our foot to come further towards. You'll see a lot of the time when I'm actually surfing, I'm actually adjusting that back foot positioning backwards and forwards in order to make the board turn or place it in different positions. If I'm stalling the board or if I'm just making some quick refinements of where the position of the board should be on the wave, you'll see my back foot literally tap back and forth depending on where it needs to be. If I'm coming back from a cross step and heading straight into a cutback, then what I'll be doing is inadvertently I'll be placing more weight onto the rail in which I need to be leaning on. Really important aspect of your surfing, and I think this is definitely something that you should have a go at. Maybe even try this with some land practice first. So get on the board, take the fin out and try practice and see how comfortable you feel placing your weight or the back foot onto one side of the rail as you come back off a cross step, because it can be difficult to practice for the first time when you're in the water, just because there's a lot going on and it's a difficult place to try something new. So practice it on land, practice it in water, and see how your turns improve and become a little bit more dynamic because you're placing that board on rail much better. Now, the second point here actually feeds into what we were speaking about previously, and it's to do with the back foot positioning, but not only where it is with regards to which side of the rail you're preferencing, but how far back do you actually bring the back foot? There's a few different answers to this depending on the section that you're on, but the biggest problem I do see is where people don't place their foot far enough back and they're sort of trying to turn within that middle third, a little bit too far up the board, which can be a problem because if we don't get enough tilt or if we don't get enough pressure on that tail, we don't disengage the rail that we need to, and therefore we've got too much rail, which if we don't have enough speed for, will make us fall or bog a rail. So it's really, really important that we do have that foot far enough back. Now, if we're in a really kind of fat section, we want to be further back onto the tail for our turns because we can disengage more rail. If you can afford to go through a section nice and powerfully and you have a fair bit of speed, we can actually afford to place a little bit more rail in the water. And this is where we might not need to come as far onto the tail. So again, if we've got a more steep critical section, we don't need to be quite as far on the tail. But if it's a flatter, slower section, we need to make sure, if we're going to do a really effective turn, to bring that foot further back. The two incorrect methods of doing this is if we're placing our foot really, really far back on the tail when it's a really steep critical section. This can work if we're really good at modulating how much pressure we have on the tail, but the risk is we lose control and we disengage that fin. And then, as I spoke about before, if we're in a fat section and we're not far enough on the tail, our board's just not going to lift up enough. We're not going to disengage the rail that we need to, and we're going to catch a rail when we're turning most likely. So let's give this a go in your sessions as well. I think this could be a really good thing to focus on. Even have a little bit of a feel on land as well, how this is going, because you might be able to record yourself and find, look, you're not actually landing as far back as you might have thought. So it could be a really good thing to focus on for yourself. Record that on land, see where you're landing, make those corrections, then go try it in the water. Now, the final thing for today is going to be talking a little bit about the space on the wave and how this comes into turning with your longboards and why it's so important. Of course, with longboards, because we've got so much rail in the water, it's really important that we do have enough space to make those turns happen. With more rail in the water, the arc of the turn is going to be much longer. The more we can disengage the rail by stepping further back onto the tail, the shorter that arc is going to be, and we can make some pivots happen, but it's quite difficult, and we still need to be really considerate of this when we're on the wave. The biggest mistake here is that people are committing turns from the bottom of the wave, which rids them the use of the whole wave to allow that drawn out carve to happen. With the wave, you should be thinking of it as like a bit of a canvas that you can kind of draw your lines on. Because we have longboards, we need to make the most of that space. And so what we need to be doing is placing our board at the very top of the wave as we come down for a turn. We want to be making sure that we can use the rail the way that we need to without getting stuck without any room left. If you think about committing a turn on the bottom of the wave, we don't really have any room to draw that carve out with speed. We're going to lose our speed, end up too far out on the flats of the wave, and it's just not going to work, and we'll likely bog a rail, fall, and all the above. So what we should try and do before we commit that turn is make sure that we're nice and high on the wave. I've got a couple of examples here that I will throw in because I think they can be useful to see, but very rarely am I making a turn happen at the bottom of the wave. And if I am making a turn happen at the bottom of the wave, it'll be a really sharp, quick, whippy turn where I'm lifting the nose out of the water super quickly and then landing straight back down rather than that carving maneuver. So I hope all of that makes sense, guys. I hope it can help your surfing as well. Again, I think these are three really key areas to focus on for your longboard turns. I think it's one thing to try and practice all of these, but to figure out exactly which one's right for your surfing might take a little bit more in-depth analysis. So see how you go with that. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm always happy to have a bit of a chat about that with you. But yeah, really excited about how this can go for your surfing. And if you implement these, I think it will solve a fair few of the issues that some of you are having. So that'd be great to hear about. We have another episode of the Sunday Glide coming up on Sunday, and then we'll have another tip time coming up in a week's time. We do these each week, so if you have any questions for next episode, please leave them in the description below and we'll be able to get to that next time. I also just wanted to thank everyone for the amazing support for following the last video and the competition I had last week. Super stoked on the result and yeah, really thrilled with it. And yeah, so just want to thank you so much. We'll leave it there for today. Hope you're all getting waves and we'll catch you on the next one. You.